Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Catherine Williams. I'm head of practice management for Dimensional Fund Advisors. And I am really excited about our conversation today. In our work with advisors around the globe, we have been measuring how they're thinking about their businesses and particularly around their people for a really long time through our global advisor study. And one of the things we've noticed with high-performing firms in particular, they are really leaning in around leadership development. What does it mean to mentor? What does it mean to really push yourself out of your comfort zone to be the leader you want to be tomorrow for the business you want to have going forward? And that is a strong characteristic in the firms today, so I'm really excited to talk with Daron about that. This is someone who has really lived in the art and the self-discipline of what that looks like for leadership development. So Daron, it's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much, and so glad to have you. We're competing with, I think there's a dance session, and then there's a drinking session also going on. So the fact that you're here, we appreciate it. We're going to have fun. This will be free-flowing, and look forward to the conversation, Catherine.
Stiff competition, but I think it will be really good. Yeah. So for those of you who do not know who Daron Roberts is, and you're going to hear a lot about his personal path, his personal journey as we go. But Daron graduated from Harvard Law, spent time with a handful of NFL teams on the coaching side. We're going to talk a little bit about that. There's some good stories there. He's the author of, and I neglected to bring the books with me, but we have them at our booth, at the Dimensional booth. He's the author of Call an Audible, and then a really fantastic children's book on empathy, which I know a few adults that should actually read that book too. So we're going to talk about that. And then you founded the Center for the Institute at the University of Texas around sports and leadership. And I really want to talk with you about what drove you to create that and what the purpose of that is. I think it aligns nicely with so much of the work we do with advisors, thinking about, I want to be the best leader possible. So many advisors, how many of you got into this business to manage people and deal with tech and bricks and mortar and all that, right? Probably not. You got into this business to take care of your clients. But now you have people and you have a mature business that you need to think about leadership around. So that's what we're going to talk about. Does that sound good? Are we in?
All right. Let's go.
So one of the things that we're going to start with maybe a little bit of a test of patience and resilience, but you wanted to go to Harvard Law.
Yes.
Let's start there. Yes. What did that look like for you?
So, when I was younger, my dad's a Baptist minister, my mom's an elementary school principal. I grew up in a small town called Mount Pleasant, Texas, population 12,291 people, and grew up, one of the most dangerous questions I think that we can ask young people is, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? If you ask a young person, what do you want to be, it's a very terminal question.
Yeah.
And so kids will, and I'm a father of 5 from age 13 to 6. So kids will start to calibrate what they think is going to impress the adult, right? And so for me, that title was lawyer. And in my junior year of high school, I still had the journal entry where I said, attend the University of Texas, elected student body president, Harvard Law School, practice in Houston for 5 years, practice in Mount Pleasant for 3 years, state senate governor by age 40. So I'm 44, so obviously I took a wrong turn somewhere.
I didn't hear anything about coaching in that.
Yeah, and still was young enough to believe in linear plans. And so that was the dream going into undergrad.
So what's maybe a better question to ask? What's the better question?
Parent
of 5 that you are.
Yeah, listen, I remember sitting in my apartment reading my waitlist letter my senior year in college. And you know how the waitlist letters are, like, Dear Daron, we like you. Unfortunately, we like so many more applicants than we like you. If all of those people turn us down, we may reach back out to you, but go somewhere else. And I didn't know what to do, and a mentor got a job for me working for Joe Lieberman on the Hill. I get to DC, it's 2001. I don't want to be there, but I think about yesterday, I'm there for September 11th. September the 11th, I'm working on education bills. September the 12th, I'm working on national security bills. And so I got this front row seat into government in a place where I didn't want to be. So I think so much when it comes to leadership, is really patience and humility to ride out the cul-de-sacs and the detours and the dead ends. And I think also we have to learn to trust our gut a little more.
Yeah. Well, and with that, I'd love to, as we sort of move forward from there, relative to, you helped to coach a 5th grade football camp, and that sparked the desire to look at coaching. What did that mean to you? Coaching, leadership, sometimes they're hand in hand, but what was that journey like in that moment? And then I definitely we're going to talk about NFL time too.
So I was an average football player in high school. My dad told me, don't have any illusion that you're going to get a college scholarship to play football, okay? You're not good. And I knew that. My grades were much better than my athletic ability. So I left football behind when I went to undergrad and then finally get into law school. And the summer before my last year of my 3L year, a buddy from high school who was a coach said, hey, I'm going to the Steve Spurrier football camp at the University of South Carolina. You should come with me. I get there, we're in a room like this, and Coach Spurrier walks out and he says, one of our volunteer coaches didn't show up. Can anyone fill in for him? So I just raised my hand, and he's like, you, what's your name? I'm like, Coach Roberts. He's like, all right, Coach, where do you coach? It's like Mount Pleasant High School. He's like, great, you got Group 6. And Group 6 was 65th graders. I coached these kids the best that I could for 3 days, but I noticed it was the first time in my life that I didn't have to set my alarm clock to get up.
You're ready to go.
At 5:30 a.m., I was out there setting up cones. I'm watching Tony Dungy YouTube videos. Like, I'm just ready to go. And that's when it hit me that although I was on a path to practice law, this is what I needed to do at that time. Yeah.
32 NFL teams.
Yes.
How many did you write to?
Yes, wrote to all 32. So I am an Excel spreadsheet, old school. I called my parents up and I said, hey, I'm going to graduate first.
Don't panic, okay, that's good.
I said, but I want to be a football coach. And my mom and dad, being the loving parents that they are, the first question out of their mouth was, do you know how much debt you're in? Okay? So I go into the Kennedy School for 2 years, HLS for 3, 5 years, $50K per year. You don't have to be a super quant to know that's $250K pre-interest.
Yeah.
And my dad said, look, the deal was we were going to pay for undergrad, but you're on the hook for grad and law school. I said, Dad, first of all, Bank of America does a really good job of reminding me every single day that the moment that Dean Elena Kagan hands that diploma to me, I have 6 months of freedom on the planet before they will hunt me down.
Starts kicking in.
And start collecting payments.
Yeah.
So I wrote a letter to every team, all 32. I get 31 rejections. Belichick, no. Dungy, no. Parcells, no. And finally got a yes from Herm Edwards, who was head coach of the Chiefs at the time.
So I want to talk about that for a little bit. And you know, in your book, Call an Audible, there's, I think, first of all, just maybe not knowing what you didn't know, but also what was sort of driving that? What gave you the confidence to do that? It can sound, you're coming out of college, you've certainly got a sort of a path that's well laid for you, right? The safe path, if you will. And when I look at leaders that I admire, people that have really taken the time, they tell stories early on in their lives about taking steps and making decisions where they had no idea really, if or when or how it might work out. And that may not have felt that dramatic for you in that moment, but that's a pretty big decision. What drove you around that, especially if you look at it, hindsight being 2020? So.
Yeah, I think a couple of things. I think unlike most of my classmates, I saw a law degree as a gateway to optionality. So it actually liberated me to take this gamble, because I remember walking into Dean Kagan's office and I said, hey, I've got this training camp internship offer from the Kansas City Chiefs. She's like, what is that? And I kind of described it to her and I said, yeah, I got these law firm offers. And she asked me, she said, which one is more, like, what's the hardest, which one is least likely to come back around?
Yeah.
And she said, look, if you coach for 20 years, I guarantee you people and companies will still be having legal issues. I promise you, you'll always be able to practice law, but there's a small, like, not even small, but just imperceptible to the human eye, narrow window of opportunity, and you should take it. And so I took it, and I graduated on June the 11th of 2007, and I jumped in my 2002 Tahoe, which just died last year, God rest its soul, and I drove from Cambridge, Massachusetts to Kansas City, Missouri, and I was the grunt for 9 months. Yeah.
What are the habits that you built during that time? Because I think that's a lot of what we're getting. Think about, right? That moving that ball forward, no pun intended. Yeah. But you were rejected numerous times. You get this one opportunity. But you are literally picking up barbecue for the offensive line. Like this is not glamorous coaching. No. But you talk a lot about the habits, the fortitude that whole 9 months built for you. Can you speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, I think number one, people will ask me what would I say is the top leadership trait? I instantly think humility. I mean, I've coached boards, I've coached directors. I've been around some elite people in different crafts. The most elite people I know have the humility to understand what they don't know. They either learn it or they hire it away. So I would say, number one, being humble enough to know that the 14 professional football coaches with the Kansas City Chiefs didn't give a damn that I had a Harvard Law degree. Yeah. That was not going to help us on third down. And so I walked in and I took my box of Pilot V5 Precise pens and my notebooks, and I just sat in the back of every room and I took copious notes. Offensive line, defensive line, special teams, head coaches meeting. I took notes and I was very quiet. So I think also there's something to be said for getting tactical. Like I love our devices, but the older I get, the more I'm trying to distance myself from technology. Old school pen and paper, the research shows there's an uptake that we get as humans that's different from technology. So I say also being humble enough to take notes. And then I would say 3 is asking for work. So every morning I would start with the head coach and I would go to every coach in the building and I would ask if there was anything I could do. Most of the time they would tell me to get the hell out. But eventually they said, okay, you can help me go set up the cones at practice. Yeah. Go get some, the defensive lineman light Skoal. And so I can see this is a very refined crowd. Skoal is chewing tobacco.
I know, yeah.
So I would buy as much Skoal as a U.S. citizen can purchase within 24 hours. Citgo, 7-Eleven, you name it. And I would take cases of wintergreen Skoal to the defensive line room. And the defensive line coach said, you've got a Harvard Law degree. Does it ever bother you that you are schlepping around Kansas City picking up wintergreen Skoal? And I said, no, because I want to be a football coach. Yeah. So I think also the last habit is embracing the menial with an understanding that eventually it's going to lead to the meaningful part of the trade.
I love that, and that really resonated with me. I know in our work with advisors, oftentimes I'm talking to that first generation or the founders of the business, and they love the talent that they have, but that talent sometimes doesn't know what they don't know. The patience, and then can anybody relate to me? You've got folks that are just super eager and maybe want to skip over a little bit some of those steps, if you will, and it just takes time, and you've got to be willing to do the menial. So I think that's really important. Yeah. So I'm going to give a little bit of a moment here because I love the fact that when it became a paid position, which was a relatively new position in the industry or in the NFL, right? It didn't exist. It was created. This is why I'm going to call it out because I'm Seattle Seahawks. So Mike Holmgren created this position. He was the 49ers. he gave this job to a young guy by the name of John Gruden. You probably, some folks might even know the name. I hope so anyway. And created this role called Defensive Quality Control Assistant. I think that might show up on some org charts here, but we're all done. And the offense has the same role as well.
Yes.
But your job was to convert reams of paper diagrams and into a digital environment. Is that inaccurate? And kind of get it all organized, and that was the role.
Yeah, you're basically an elevated grunt.
Yeah, I was going to say,
so
you went from grunt to like grunt 2.0. That's pretty, yeah.
Like going from 0 to 50K per year. And my sole job as a defensive quality control coach was like, this is the season, right? So Sunday, let's say that the Chiefs played the Lions on Thursday. As a defensive quality control coach, before that game, I would have watched the last 4 games that Kansas City played last year. For each play of offense, there are 30 different variables, formation, number of receivers. Break that down into a statistical tendency sheet. Give that to the defensive coordinator, who then gives that to every player. And so after every game, the quality control coach is immediately thinking about next Sunday. So I can remember times where we're playing the Chargers, the old school Chargers in San Diego. I'm in San Diego, but my mind is thinking about the fact that we're playing Oakland next week.
Yeah.
A la Los Angeles or Las Vegas. And I'm always 2 or 3 games ahead. It is like getting a PhD in coaching. You come out of the quality control year, there isn't much about any of the other 31 teams in terms of tendencies that you don't understand.
Yeah. And I raised this story, I asked you this story because I want to ask you, when we think about strong leadership, I think both you and I would agree that a great leader is also one that is seeking feedback, looking for that feedback, no matter what job they're doing. And you got a lot of feedback those early days in that particular position. I'm thinking specifically of Gunther Cunningham as a mentor. So what was that, being on the receiving end of that feedback? What did you learn through that process that's informed even today how you operate?
The NFL is an interesting place because HR never quite gets involved. So, there isn't like this 360 or feedback every
you don't hold
6
hands
months.
and
We don't hold hands.
Kumbaya.
Someone walks into your office and says, if you don't get this shit straight, you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
Now, right? Because I think what's interesting, people ask me, is there anything I miss about the NFL? And I don't miss sleeping in my office. I don't miss the road games. I do miss the urgency. In the corporate space, you have these long-term plans, like these long-term strategic plans. In the NFL, it's every Sunday. And your work product is viewable by the globe.
Yeah.
So there is an urgency to fix problems that I have yet to see in many sectors. Like the problem, maybe the military, like the problem gets fixed now, or you're removed. I think this is also good for advisors to think about is, if you analogize some practices from the NFL, you're constantly evaluating your roster. The first question that your head coach asks you every morning is, who is the first person out of your room? Who is the last person we cut out of your room?
Yeah.
So who's your best guy? Who's your last guy? Because as teams are cutting people, if we see better talent, we are going to cut a guy to get a guy. I think that sometimes I've seen this with advisors where the team they started with, they don't understand it's not the team that they can scale with.
Yeah.
I see this with startups as well, right? Like the founder team may not be the Series B, Series C team. So constantly evaluate your roster to try to understand, like, do I have the people who can fill the skills that I need in order to take my business to the next level?
Yeah, I was just speaking with an advisor last night. They've hired, and then they also had 3 people walk out. That was the very best thing for their business. It's been a game changer for their climate, their culture, but also where the business needs to go going forward. So I think
and it's tough because it's a tight labor market.
Tough. Yep.
Right? So I get this is very difficult.
Yep.
The one thing is when you find good people, you pay them, you incentivize them, you give them professional development, like you invest as much as you can, because I'm not telling you anything you don't know. Losing that key player can set the business back, right?
In fact, we're just now closing out our 2023 benchmark study, and we're looking at high-performing firms and how they handle their folks, how they handle their people. And one of the statistics that's jumped out for this year in particular, high-performing firms, when we asked them, I mean, everybody lost somebody, right? Talent moved over the last 12 months. There's no doubt about that. But high-performing firms, for sure, have a higher retention rate. And when we asked, why did those people leave that organization as opposed to the other firms in our study, for the high-performing firms, it was predominantly the firm decided to let them go, which I actually think is the sign of a healthy organization, that to your point, that you're willing to do that. We hadn't really seen that in prior data. So the fact that firms, I think, are getting really disciplined, and maybe because of the last few years where we were willing to kind of put up with a C or D player because we were at capacity and we were concerned. It's nice to see that that's starting to turn, and I think a lot of what we're talking about today is really about leaning in on that.
Which is something you hear this in business: hire slow, fire fast.
Yeah.
And it makes me think of the NFL. As soon as the last game of the season's over, every position coach is evaluating every college athlete in his position group meticulously.
Yeah.
Every team has 2 former FBI agents at least, who are giving, like, from birth to the present tense, an analysis of the player.
Yeah.
So when that person's drafted, you know how they fit into the organization, the baggage, like you have a really good understanding of what you're getting. So you're hiring very slowly. But once you figure out it's not a fit, you move on quickly.
You gotta do something about it.
And you do it the right way, I think, in the corporate setting.
Yeah.
But those decisions, this is where I see most firms, this is where they get stuck.
Agreed.
On both ends of that kind of HR pipeline.
Yeah. So you've touched on this a little bit. I'd love to go back. You talk a lot about this, sort of those micro wins and really establishing that, personal strategy. So I'm taking a wild guess. We have in the audience here and those listening, we have long established leaders, people that are responsible for dozens, if not hundreds of lives. And we have up-and-coming leaders, folks that are really looking to maybe be potential future owners of the business one day. They want to be great for their clients. When you think about the discipline of that, sort of looking for those micro wins, can you speak a little bit to what that's looked like for you?
Yeah, for me, I've said this. My wife and I have 5 incredible children from age 13 to 6.
The Donut Council.
The Donut Council. So we have this thing called the Donut Council. Every Saturday, I take them to a different donut shop in Austin, Texas, or if we're on the road somewhere there. There are 42 donut shops if you're interested, curious, in Austin alone.
We just want to know who your favorite is.
Yeah. Even though it's a chain, it's kind of Pacific Northwest. Voodoo would probably be my
good
favorite.
Choice. Yeah.
Good choice. So, micro wins. I just found that consistency beats talent all the damn time. All the time. And I don't trust myself from a discipline standpoint, so I have to give myself very strict systems in order for me to have freedom. And I think a lot of times we think of systems as being confining.
Yeah, restrictive.
My systems liberate me to put time into activities where I want to put them. So for me, micro wins are small units of victory that lead towards a big goal. So every single day, I have 3 categories: work, family, and health, so WFH. And I have a micro win in each category, and I write that down on a 4x6 index card. So right now, my publisher is upset because I haven't gotten a manuscript in, so it's write 250 words. I've got a kid who's playing a big-time soccer game, so it's FaceTime with Jack for family. And for health, it's drink a green smoothie, right? And the research shows that humans are really good at big goals. Think New Year's resolutions, by February the 2nd, 82% of them are either forgotten or broken.
Yeah.
Micro wins give me the momentum to sustain performance over time. And for the folks who have incorporated that system into their work style, I think they've had the similar success.
During your time in the NFL, who are some leaders that you came to admire?
I'm a big Mike Tomlin fan. I think.
And why? I should say why. Right?
Why? Yeah, Mike Tomlin's the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Why do I admire him? This guy. I don't know how many years he's been coaching. 15 close. Never had a losing season. From a leadership standpoint, there's no doubt when he communicates with his team where you stand. So I think a lot of times leaders think they're communicating when they're really talking around the issue, and then we get upset because the folks on our team aren't executing. Mike Tomlin's very clear about communicating the expectation, having his players and coaches verbalize that back to him.
Okay.
He's then showing them how he wants it to look. He's having them demonstrate it by show it back to them.
That's great.
And then when that's in, he's like, look, now you're accountable.
Yeah.
So I really admire him. Calvin Johnson, also known as Megatron, at the Detroit Lions, 6'5", 238 pounds. Here's a guy who, graduates from Georgia Tech, 392 in mechanical engineering, vertical jump of 43 inches, 4.38 40. So what I'm saying is, Calvin Johnson can just show up on a Sunday on an NFL field and is better than 99% of the humans running around. Calvin Johnson approached the game as if he was the first person on the cutting block. First guy in the building, last guy in the building. He's catching 500 balls on the jugs machine, this automatic ball throwing machine. Before practice, every ball that he dropped at practice, he had to catch 50 balls. He's constantly harassing his wide receivers coach about what he sees on tape, a tip. And this is one thing I find about elite people, like really elite people.
Yeah.
It goes back to the humility. In the NFL, the margin of victory is 3.7 points. So players and coaches are they're operating on the margins.
Yeah.
And so they're meticulous about, if you can give me one tip that's going to help me on one play, I'm going to trust you. So I think to round this, those are the two people. And it just reminds me that elite people want to be coached.
Yeah.
I asked Tony Dungy, I said, is Peyton Manning a jackass? When I was coaching, he just looked like a jackass, kind of like a prick to me. Dungy said to me, he said, Peyton Manning's the most coachable player I've ever been around. He is constantly asking coaches for an edge to make him better on Sundays.
Yeah.
And that just reminds me that elite people, regardless of whatever success you've had in the past, you want to be coached.
I love that, and I think something you've really touched on here, and I've talked with Craig Wortman about it and others, that it's the disciplined approach to practice, and getting good at getting great really is what that's all about, but it's the reps. You've got to do that, and certainly as you're building up leadership in your organizations, young talent, they're impatient. They want to be in front of clients. They want to have all of that ability, but sometimes it just simply takes time because there are only so many reps you can do in the day, and so that disciplined approach I think is really critical. I appreciate you highlighting that. Yeah. So let's move forward a little bit, and I wanted to talk with you. I mean, there was a pivotal moment in NFL time that kind of triggered for you this idea of a broader curriculum, a more specific curriculum. The University of Texas is where this was created. Can you talk a little bit about what you saw and observed, the need that you saw? Maybe it's a problem to solve, but certainly an opportunity.
So 2014, I left. I get fired from the Browns. So Jimmy Haslam's a new owner. Rob Chudzinski is the head coach. We lose to Mike Tomlin, and Pittsburgh on the last kick in the last game of the season. We get off of the plane. I get a text message from the owner's chief of staff that says 8 a.m. staff meeting, coaches plus owner, room 1A. Only certain things happened in room 1A. None of them were good. Yeah. We get in the room. Jimmy Haslam walks in at 8 o'clock and he says, hey guys, look, I appreciate all of you coaches and I appreciate your contributions. You're all fired. I wish you and your families well. Meeting started at 8 o'clock. Meeting ended at 8:01. I drive home, and I start scrambling eggs, and my 3-year-old son walks over and says, you eat breakfast? And I'm like, I did what any good father would do in a moment like this. I just ignored the kid and just kept scrambling, I'm thinking about the next city I'm going to.
Go find your mom.
Right? Yeah. And he comes back and he says, you eat breakfast. And then the irony hit me that I'd been spending all of my time with other people's sons, and my own son didn't know me. This brings me to a point where I don't care how well the business is going. If things aren't right at home, there isn't an award or a revenue benchmark. There isn't anything that will overcome the issue at home. I've seen this from Fortune 100 CEOs all the way down to startups. If things aren't right at home, you can't outperform the folks in your vicinity. And so I left coaching. I went back to the University of Texas, started teaching leadership, entrepreneurship courses, and started a Center for Sports Leadership and Innovation. CSLI teaches financial literacy and leadership classes to all freshman athletes. And look, I know we bemoan athletes wasting money. You're in the business. You know that a lot of wealthy non-athletes also screw up their money. Okay, so let's get that straight. But like I tell athletes...
but we'd still like to say that.
Yes. But like I tell my athletes, Bob next door who's over-leveraged and driving the latest Tesla and can't get rid of the second vacation home, his story isn't going to end up on the front cover of Sports Illustrated, but yours will. Yeah. So it's visible. So it's been good to see just the learning that's... it's good to see young men and women, because it's for both men and women in all sports, really learn just the basics. I mean, we start with Maslow's hierarchy of needs versus wants, right? And then, move to budgeting. And it's amazing to watch just the growth because they're not getting it in public school. They're not getting it in private school. Here's something else that the stats will show you. Even when you go up the wealth income ladder, the higher you go up the wealth income ladder and you look at the children of wealthy parents, actually there's an inverse relationship between financial acumen of kids and the wealth of their parents. Because what happens is you just assume through osmosis, little Jimmy and Jermaine and Janine are gonna figure it out. And they don't know anything. I've conducted a lot of studies at UT where my wealthiest kids had no clue budgeting, assets and liabilities, zero.
Well, we were talking about taxes earlier.
God,
accounting.
Taxes.
Big opportunity here.
Yes.
Where people can help with that.
So I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially in the NIL era, for us to make a lot of headway earlier rather than later.
What preconceptions do you find that they come in with that you sort of immediately have to? Is there any common themes around that? Yeah, you know what? We do basic things like the rule of 72. And it's amazing to watch them. Because everyone says, everyone does the whole, what happens if compounding interest, and let's say that the interest rate is 5, and then it goes up to... But it's different to watch kids really look at numbers. My favorite lesson has always been the rule of 72, and to play with that denominator. And they say, whoa. Right? Both from an appreciation and a depreciation standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Like, just to look at the impact. Some other this is just we have a human proclivity to believe that we're going to live longer than we are, and that our earning years will be longer, our peak earning years will be longer than they will be. Yeah. So this notion of starting early is also something that this takes a lot of time, but
once they start to understand it, they're in.
Yeah.
So it's important work, and we're having fun.
That's great.
Yeah.
You've had the opportunity to work with CEOs, leaders across many industries, different sizes and shapes. Talk a little bit about some of the consistent characteristics and behaviors you see in business leaders, both good and maybe potentially bad.
Yeah, good and bad.
Continue to show up. Yeah.
I got a long list on both.
Do you need a whiteboard? Well, there.
I'll start with the elite side. Elite leaders have this, look, we spend a lot of time in school where we really work on this part of us. Elite leaders kind of understand where the gut has to come into play into the equation. The algorithms and the forecast and the consultant spreadsheets may not give you the true picture.
Yeah.
And there's really no recipe for this, but elite leaders know when to go from cerebral to gut. And it's a fascinating thing to watch where they know when to trigger which skill set.
Yeah.
I think that average leaders want to stay here. And what you find is, I'll go back to the elite side, elite leaders know when to shift from capability to sustainability.
Okay.
So in the early part of your career, you're trying to show everyone that you're the best advisor, you can get the most clients, right? It's all about numbers.
Yeah.
Elite leaders understand that at some point in your career, you have to now shift to sustainability in order to be relevant in the business. It's less about proving, it's more about sustaining, right?
What are some ways you see them doing that?
They hire for their blind spots, and they hire for their time. If you ask me the 10x move in my life, I hired an executive assistant 5 years ago. That woman gave me 75% of my calendar back.
Yeah.
I wake up, I'm rerouted on planes, cars have changed times, W-2s are. She has taken so many of the things that I thought was like the grind culture, and I used to be like a card-carrying member of like the Hustlenista movement. And now I understand that there is a real thing such as decision fatigue.
Yeah.
My best cerebral power begins in the morning and it wanes as it goes down. So I guard my mornings with my life.
Yeah.
And I do all of my menial work the second half of the day.
Does anybody else structure their day?
You like that?
Love it. We're seeing a lot more of that.
I will say this, I'm sorry, Catherine, but you got me going.
Go.
People talk about morning routines. I think night routines. The elite people I know are setting themselves up to win the night before tomorrow. So for me, it's like I'm setting out my workout clothes. You know, Obama famously had 15 navy suits, 15 gray suits, all white shirts or blue shirts, and like solid ties.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to make any decisions. I make my coffee, I make my breakfast, my workout clothes, what I'm going to wear the next day. When I wake up, I don't have any menial decisions to make.
Yeah.
So my mornings are as crisp as possible, and I have 2 hours before my kids get up, and it goes haywire.
Right.
Right? I think you have to be really meticulous about that.
Yeah. No, it's great, and we've seen as advisory businesses have gotten bigger and more complex, and you have those original founders that are starting to transition. In some cases, G2 is transitioning to G3 now. Like we've been doing this for a while, but this idea that all of the skills that were embodied in one person for that firm is really actually going to be 3 or 4 people for that next generation, and understanding what that needs to look like, the skill sets. I mean, there's some folks here in the room that I've had very specific conversations that are doing this in their business, and really being open to the idea of it's going to take 2 or 3 people to keep this business going, and that's an opportunity for somebody to come in and cover a blind spot for me.
And for those of you, I'm on the board of a medium-sized private equity company in Houston. For those of you, you're family-owned, and you've assumed that the kids will take over the business. Let me just say this. You better start having succession planning conversations sooner rather than later. Because I have a lot of owners finding out the kids either don't want the business or they can't run it.
Yeah, some don't know that they're the succession plan.
And they don't know that they don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
And it is painful to watch a business that's been built over 30, 40 years, and these tough conversations happen because they didn't happen earlier.
Yeah.
I think also the elite people I know are always thinking about they're thinking about succession planning not only for their key leaders, but for the business in general.
Yes.
And they're setting those dominoes in place.
Yeah.
In the present tense.
That's great. And they're bringing that mindset to their clients who are business owners as well, and often, really showing up for their clients that way. I love that.
Yes.
So I want to be sure we talk a little bit about, I've mentioned to our audience here, a great book called on Audible. We have copies at the Dimensional booth, which you're going to be at. So swing by, ask a question, you can get a copy. But we also have copies of a kid's book about empathy, which is a terrific book. As I mentioned, I think many adults should read the book as well, too. And we've got copies at the booth. But why a children's book? Why a children's book on empathy?
Yeah, Brene Brown, sort of the godmother.
Oh, you can just stop there. No, I'm just
no. The godmother of current vulnerability and empathy. She came to teach at the University of Texas in 2018, and she and I were having a conversation. And I said, I'm not sure my wife and I are really talking about empathy with our kids. And a good friend of mine who runs a company called a Kids Co. So you've probably heard about Kids Book about racism. I just called him up and I said, I have this kid's book about empathy idea. He's like, come to Portland. And I flew in that weekend and we wrote the book in like 48 hours. And I went back to Austin. That was February of 2020.
2020. Oh my goodness.
And it's been awesome. It was on Oprah's favorite things list in 2021. Look, people talk about empathy, and I know it's kind of the sexy vulnerability and empathy, and we kind of snap our fingers and keep going. The elite leaders I know are scoring a 10 on the empathetic lens. And it's not just for show. Like, they are listening to people. They are restating what they think they heard. They're making eye contact. They're taking time to reflect. They're circling back around. And this is what I say about, management's about efficiency. It's about widgets and moving things around a spreadsheet. Leadership is inefficient by design. It is messy.
Yeah.
And I think that the good leaders understand that they've got to do a little bit of that messy work to really get a good sense of where their people and the business is.
And we're a business at the end of the day, right? All of us are. And there have been more than a few times as a former COO where I just wanted to say, could you just be quiet and go back to your desk and put your head down and do your job? Like, I don't want to talk about this. But it really is important to dial that up and pay attention to it. And hopefully you don't have to sit in that space 24/7 with your team. That's not what we're talking about here. But in those moments, you can tap it when you need to and show it.
Your people will stay with you. And the research shows that people will stay with empathetic leaders even when the pay is not up to par. Like, the ROI on empathy from a business perspective, it doesn't show up in the spreadsheet, right? And the McKinsey report won't have it. But your people will stay with you because they believe that you are invested in them.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the extra 5 minutes when you really wanted to leave, but you listened through Charlene's weekend.
Yeah.
That may keep Charlene there 6 months, 12 months, 5 years more.
We are also seeing this show up in our global investor study, which is all about the advisors and clients. This is a 7-year-old study. We've had over 90,000 end clients that have participated. So we got a little bit of data. It's very dimensional. We love our data.
We do love it.
And it's definitely an area that we see where advisors dial that up. The client retention rate goes up for sure with their clients. So I think that is the music that is telling us we are out of time.
Oh, man, with no questions. Oh, man. Oh,
is that right? Am I getting
questions?
a flag? I don't know. We got 5 minutes?
We got 5 minutes?
All right.
Okay.
You can tell I'm usually like in the studio, like, we'll just edit that out.
You're like, we'll edit that out.
We will take questions. So definitely throw your hand in the air, holler it out, and we'll play it back for the audience for sure if anybody's got any questions. Anyone?
Don't be shy.
Keep going. All right. I love it. So what's next for you?
I got to finish this manuscript.
How are you getting out of your comfort zone next time?
I am going to, go to the Dimensional Cabana. I'm going to sign some books. I'm going to have a Tito's with some lime. Then I'm going to go to my hotel room and write. And I'm going to write until my flight leaves tomorrow.
Micro wins, right?
Yeah. For me, I'll say this is that I think that you're never too old to keep asking yourself what lights you up. Like, keep asking yourself, like, what lights you up?
Yeah.
And the answer kept coming back to me that speaking and writing are the two things that light me up the most.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's finishing. I'm actually finishing a book on micro wins. And if my publisher doesn't divorce me between now and the pub date. And I'll say this. I've stopped reading self-help books, even though I'm writing a self-help book. But I will say...
So don't read any self-help books except for yours when it's
yes.
done. Yeah, okay.
There are some game-changing text for me. Rest is Resistance by Tricia Hersey. I strongly encourage you. You're going to get all the HBR articles. You got all those, memberships. She talks about rest and how, like, the rejuvenation that comes with it. And it's really forced me, Catherine, to think through the way that I approach my life.
Yeah.
As I'm trying to, fully pull away from this hustle-nista mentality. And so I'm also focusing on downtime and being where my feet are.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things, you've answered the question already. I love to ask some of my podcast guests about James Mathis, who's four-star Marine, former Secretary of Defense, and he talks about solitude allows you to reflect when others are just reacting. And so you've answered the question already in terms of, like, how do you do that? Because this is a room full of busy business owners. You're one of them, and so I appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah, I will say that we really pride ourselves. Think about the conversations you've had with people here. We pride ourselves on busyness with a Y. You meet someone, hey, how's it going? Oh, I just got off of 12 Zoom calls. They were all concurrent, and I have a call, I got a memo, right? Like, we love to kind of prove our value by expressing how busy we are. I'm reminded of Ndamukong Suh, went to the University of Nebraska, connected with Warren Buffett, and shadowed him for a day. And he said, from 8 until 12.
Wow, that's an internship.
Yes. He's like, can I come? He's like, yeah, come shadow me. Come on. From 8 to 12, Buffett read paper form newspapers and articles, and he looked out of a window. And so Sue, they go to lunch in the middle of the day, and he's like, hey, so when does the deal making start? Like, when are we going to start? He's like,
this is it.
That was it. And I think that we've confused loneliness and solitude. We've conflated those two terms. Solitude is where you will find your best ideas and decisions come out of solitude.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to extract yourself from the madness. And I will say that if you want to be an elite leader, extraction is a necessity.
Stepping away.
Yeah.
An example of that, we've a number of advisors that are taking, purposeful sabbaticals to step away from the business, but also then give real work to that next gen and see how they get it done, right? And so there can also be some good purpose in the business for that.
If you can't extract yourself from the business, it's your fault. You either haven't hired the right people, you haven't hired the right type of people, right? It's your fault if you can't pull yourself out of the business. That is the fault of the manager, because what that tells me is, and you can say, well, we're just growing too fast. What that tells me is that you haven't really assessed the needs of the company and put people in the right positions such that you as the leader can pull away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. We're in Pac-12 country. No, I'm just kidding. What am I going to ask
Pac-12? I don't know. Is it Pac-12? I don't know
Pac-12?
what. Pac-2. It'll be Pac-1
Pac-2.
probably by happy hour.
Big 12. Yeah. Football's underway. It's all good. We won't answer. Any questions for Daron before we close out our time?
Seriously.
Quiet.
You're just waiting for the drinks?
They used them all on Jason, I guess, earlier or something to do that. So, yeah. Well, we got a question. Yes.
Calvin Johnson, can you speak to just his work ethic and then how you think about that relative to potential burnout and obviously closing his career?
Let me repeat the question.
Yeah, Calvin Johnson,
His work ethic.
This guy's like, the Calvin Johnson work ethic and then burnout. Calvin Johnson worked harder than anyone else that I saw. He also had the genes to not have to work as hard as he did, which says something about Calvin Johnson as
Does that meaning he made it harder for himself? No.
I'm saying that he had no control over being 6'5".
Got it. Oh, okay.
And the research shows that your speed, although you're probably paying a lot for your speed coach for your kid, there's a ceiling. There's very low movement on speed. He just had it, but he also acted as if he was like a 7th round pick.
Yeah.
I also think that this is what a deficiency from the Lions. When you don't surround your best people with the best people, they leave. A la Calvin Johnson retiring early.
Yeah.
So I think it's a lesson for us as leaders.
Good reminder.
There's another question.
Yeah, earlier you talked about the concept of hiring slow and firing fast. Then you transitioned further on about being an empathetic leader. And I'm wondering if you find that being a clash between a good leader and
Yeah.
fast.
So the question is balance between slow to fire fast, but being empathetic. So, AK coaching, giving time, all that. Yeah, great question.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think they're compatible. I think this is a great question. So, when I say hire slow, we're talking about the vetting process, the due diligence, the communication process, and the alignment of this person's skills with your need. Very slow process, so you make sure as much as you can, you get it right. Fire fast. Now, when the person gets in the building, as we would say in the NFL, you're gonna wrap as many support services, your time, like you're gonna wrap them with as much support as humanly possible, because I kind of view them as the first round rookie that's gonna start on week 1. You wanna set him or her up for success. So you're gonna wrap those services around them. There is some point after you've seen performance and after you've seen habits, and the empathy allows you to to really get on the ground level and communicate with the individual. I hate to say this, but there are some uncoachable humans on the planet.
Yeah. None of them are here.
Yeah, yeah, of course, right? There are some uncoachable humans. And so the empathy allows you to really get insight into someone. And once you've arrived at that conclusion, that's where the firing fast comes in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great. It's a great question.
I think we have one more if they'll let us. She's probably going to kick us off. She's like,
one more? Okay.
What's the most impactful thing that you have recently changed your mind on?
ooh, what's the most impactful thing that I've recently changed my mind on? Race in America.
That's a good question.
Race. I used to be in the Obama hopeful category. I think it's a deep wound in America, and I don't believe that we're really willing to do the hard work for it to heal. And so in a previous life, I did a lot of DEI work and, trust falls and all the check the boxes that companies will do who don't mean it. And then I cut that off in 2020. I'm like, I'm not doing any of that. I'm still hopeful, but we'll see. We'll see.
Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks,
This has been
Daron.
fun.
It was good to see you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Appreciate
everyone.
it. Thank you so much.